في نعم والله طول ما انت بخير يا سمر.
والناس الجميله
في نعم والله طول ما انت بخير يا سمر. بيصبحوا عليكي وبيصبحوا علينا وصباح كل حاجه حلوه على حضرتك.
فيهم وصباح فيهم كل سنه وهم طيبين.
وانت طيب.
ولا ايه؟
برضه انت طيب يا سمر. برضه يا سيدي. بص اقول لك حاجه. الشخص المصري ده خلق عشيري لو ما عملش حاجه كده ما بقاش ماشي. لا دي الحاجه الوحيده اللي انا بعملها مثلا الفشه والممرض والمدرسه والطحال وسوق الدين وسوق الفجر والكرشه والمنصوص والقرار في الفرن وفصل الجواب بص السبت الحد الاثنين ثلاثه كل نعم.
انا كلمتك بتاعتك امبارح.
لا بس
يعني انا خايفه اكون انا شايفه الجانب الايروتيكي في الحوار الاخير مع سمر لوحدي. بس انا يعني اعتقد عايزه بس اضرب المثل ده على تعدد الخطابات جنب بعض. يعني ما فيش يعني مش حلقه في المود الديني والحديث عن الأصالة والذاكرة والفرن البلدي وكانت أيام وبكاء على الأطلال، وفي حلقة تانية عنده مود استخدام الأكل الشيف شربيني مصر عليه في البرنامج بتاعه. لكن الحقيقة ابنه بيشترك معاه في نفس الصفة، فكرة تعدد الخطابات في نفس ال عايزة بس تشوفوا ابنه ثانية وبعدين هروح الفيديو التاني. اسمعوا بقى اللي هيقولوا عن التوابل. اوكي، الحقيقه هو معرفش قالها ولا لا، انا ما خدتش بالي. قال احنا مش المفروض نحط على المسقعه اي حاجه بره المطبخ المصري. قال ده؟ انا كنت سرحانه اكيد. اوكي. بس انتوا لو كتبتم الشيف علاء شربيني ومسقعه هتشوفوا انه في حلقه تانية بيقدم نفس المسقعه المصري وبيتكلم على الانفتاح على المطابخ التانية زي بابا بالظبط الحقيقه. يعني اقصد نفس فكره تجاور الخطابات دي. في فيديو انا مش هوريه لكم بس اتمنى لو حد مهتم يشوفه. علاء شربيني الابن بيعمل حوار مع الشيف شربيني الاب في احد البرامج. Here it is. الشيف شربيني في الحلقة دي بيقدم السرد بتاعه الخاص عن قصة حياته، وده يعني المهم تقريبا في الحلقة دي ان هو بيتكلم عن الغرام بتاعه بالأكل، وازاي هو مشى ورا الغرام ده. يعني راح مثلا دول عربية عشان يشتغل ويحوش فلوس، خد الفلوس دي وطلع على أوروبا عشان يتعلم المطبخ الأوروبي. بيتكلم فعلا عن الأصالة والمعاصرة بشكل واضح جدا وتحسي بنفس التعارض في كلامه. عن كأنها مشكلة مش محلولة، كأنه صورة من الثقافة العربية كلها يعني، أو انعكاس ليها، إنه إحنا مع الأكل بتاعنا أحسن أكل في الدنيا والمفروض نعمل كذا كذا، وبعدين مفيش تسامح، مفيش تصالح بين المطابخ في ذهنه يعني. فلما يتكلم عن ده يبقى شديد الحماس، ولما يتكلم عن ده يبقى شديد الحماس. هروح لرقم 6. وهتكلم فيها عن مسقعة أبي ولغتها الخاصة. أن آكل حروف العربية هي أن أفكر في الأكل واللغة في نفس اللحظة، سر الأسرار. ينفتح الجسد الإنساني على اللغة والكلام عن وصفات الطعام، عن الطبق القومي، وعن طبقية الأكل وأمراضه. ولكن تفكيري في اللغة والأكل يستحضر دائما طبق الخاص ولغته الخاصة. مسقعة أو مسقعة أبي وطريقته في وصفها، ووقفته في المطبخ لإعدادها. في الحقيقة بس يعني أنا عندي نص بتاع 10 صفحات عن مسقعة أبي، فأنا مش ممكن أقراه. فأنا يعني كنت بس عايزة أرجع لفكرة السرد الشخصي عن الأكل. إنه لما الواحد بيتكلم عن طبق المسقعة، ممكن يتكلم عن علاقتي بأبويا من أولها لآخرها عبر حبي لطبق المسقعة اللي هو بيعمله، ونرفزته الشديدة جدا وغضبه إذا أنا حاولت أقف معاه في المطبخ مثلا لو هو بيزورني في كندا وأعمل معاه الطبق ده. في حالة من السلطة والسيطرة الإلهية، اللي هو مش لازم حد أصلا يبص له في الأكل، يعني مش لازم حد ينظر له الأكلة بأنه يتفرج عليه وهو بيعملها. لكن اللي عايزة أقوله هنا بما إني بتكلم عن اللغة والأكل، إن أكتر حاجة بتخلي الطبق ده حميم أو مهم بالنسبة لي هي طريقة بابا في وصفه ليه. بابا مثلا بيتكلم عن إنك لما تروحي تشتري البتنجان في السوق لازم تشتريه صاحي، وبعد ما تقطعيه بيتكلم عن الخطوة العادية جدا اللي في المطبخ المصري بيقولوها ترشي ملح على شرائح البتنجان. الناس بيقولوا علشان تصفي المية، علشان ما ياخدش زيت كتير. أبويا بيقول لغاية ما البتنجان يدبل وينعم. وده دايما كان بيخليني أفكر في إن في كل التراث القديم عن إن ثمرة البتنجان أصلا مرتبطة بالجنون، مرتبطة ثمرة يعني عندها إرادة هي نفسها، وإنها ممكن تصيب الناس بالجنون، وإن فيه سلطتين، سلطة الطابخ وسلطة المطبوخ. إن أبويا لازم يخلص البتنجان من إرادته بإنه يدبله وينعمه الأول. بيتكلم كمان عن إنك لما الناس بيحطوا طبقات البتنجان في الصينية، عادة بيتم الوصف ده، بعض الناس بيكلموا عن دفن شرائح البتنجان تحت الصوص من خبرتي بالتفرج على برامج الطبخ، وبعض الناس بيقولوا بنغطي البتنجان بالصلصة. لكن أبويا الحقيقة ما بيستخدمش أي معلومات تخص المقادير ولا الدقة في وصفه لعمل الأكل. يعني كان عندي مشكلة رهيبة جدا شخصية معاه وأنا في أمريكا أو كندا، لما أطلب منه وصفة فيقول لي في التليفون تحطي نطرة كمون. يعني إيه نطرة كمون؟ يقول لك أنا متأكدة إن هو بيعمل كده بس أنا مش شايفاه في التليفون. بيقولك بين صوابعك، أو بتحطي كبشة ملح، فالكبشة ممكن تكون كده كمان، لكن الكبشة في الحقيقة طلع إن هي 3/4 معلقة شاي تقريبا. إحساسي بإنه مش أعظم طبق مسقعة ممكن تاكله في العالم، لكن هو تعريف الأكل مع اللغة بالنسبة لي، بسبب العلاقة ديت الطويلة في وصف الطبق وفي طريقة تقديمه وفي شكل وقفة شخص بيحبك بيعمل لك الطبق ده لأنه عارف إن أنت كمان بتحبه. آخر حاجة في الكلام بتاعي هتكون عن السرد في برامج الهواة. الحقيقة برامج الهواة بتقدم مادة ربما تكون في رأيي الشخصي أكثر ثراء حتى من برامج الطبخ المهنية المشهورة اللي أنا قاعدة أوريكم منها نماذج لغاية دلوقتي. بمعنى إن هي مش بتحاول تقدم وصفه اكل مثاليه بيرفكت يعني، وما فيش شكل للمطبخ كمان ولا الادوات بتاعته بيرفكت. الاكل التقليدي اللي بيتقدم عبر برامج الهواه للاسف الشديد بيحاول يقلد البرامج المهنيه ديت، لكن ما عندوش امكانيات ان هو يقلدها. الجاب ده بين عدم وجود امكانيات وبين الرغبه في التقليد هو اللي بيطلع السرد اللي انا بتصور ان هو بالغ الثراء في فهم المطبخ العربي وفي فهم لغه الاكل في الثقافه العربيه دلوقتي. انت ممكن تلاقي في المطبخ ده حاجات مختلفه، حاجات مش شرط انها اكزوتيك يعني طبخات تقليديه قوي او ناس فقراء ومطابخ فقيره، انت ممكن تلاقيها من كل الطبقات الحقيقه. هعطيكم بس امثله لده.
دلوقتي بقى هعمل طبق بحبه قوي، بموت فيه. الطبق ده انا وماما مشتركين في حبه، غالبا انا وهي بس بنعمله، واحنا بس الاثنين اللي بناكله. هعمل اكله اسمها مسقعه من غير لحمه، بس هي اسمها الحقيقي فلفل وبتنجان، بس عشان هي عباره عن فلفل وبتنجان. اول حاجه قطعنا البتنجان وحطينا له ملح علشان ينزل ميته وما يشربش زيت لما نيجي نقليه. بصوا يعني هي الاكله دي لازم نقلي البتنجان. عايزين تشوفوا الفرن على مسؤوليتكم الخاصه، انا ماليش دعوه، هو لازم يتقلي.
تقريبا ما عادش ممكن ان اللي بيقدم برامج اكل عربي يتفادى الكلام عن الاكل الصحي سواء مع او ضد. تقريبا ما فيش برنامج ولا وصفه ممكن تشوفوها من غير ما تكون ديت وحده دلاليه بيتم تبادلها مع الجمهور. الغريب انه في دايما في البرامج المهنيه اللي زي الشيف شربيني وكذا تناقض شديد جدا. يعني ممكن في حلقه يقول لك انسى الكلام ده، احنا كنا بناكل زبده وزيوت وما كانش بيحصل حاجه والناس ما كانوش بيروحوا للدكاتره. نفس الخطاب الشعبوي عن فكره الاكل، وان الاكل الصحي ده خرافه يعني مش حاجه حقيقيه. وفي حلقه تانية ممكن نفسه الشيف شربيني يكلمك باهتمام شديد جدا عن ان احنا هنشوي البتنجان مش ليه علشان الزيت والناس اللي عندها كوليسترول وكذا. في البرامج الهواه بتلاقي دايما حاجه اكثر اصاله ربما، ان في قناعه شخصيه بالموضوع. يعني ممكن ناس بيكلموك عن موضوع الاكل الصحي بجديه شديده او رافضينه تماما. في البرامج الهواه دي بتحس كانك بتعرف قصه شخصيه كبيره جدا من غير ما الشخص يسردها قدامك. اعتقد ان دي اكتر حاجه خلابه في برامج الهواه. هنا هتلاقوا واحد بيصور مامته وهي بتعمل كوارع مصريه. خرجت انا من موضوع المسقعه اخيرا. بتعمل كوارع مصريه، بيبدا بزيك يا ماما، ويعني بتحس ان هو في مطبخ بيتي. طبعا علشان المطبخ امكانياته محدوده بيتم الكاميرا بتركز بس على الاكل الحقيقه، لا بتشوف صوره الابن ولا صوره الام. ومع ذلك كميه السرد عن الاكل في وعلاقه الوجبه بالناس اللي هياكلوها، الناس اللي مستنيين وجاعوا، وحتى بتقول لابنها في اخر الفيديو لا انا مش هحمر الكوارع ولا الكلام ده، خلينا نخلص بقى اخواتك جاعوا. بتعرف حاجه عن تاريخ اسري، تاريخ علاقات. بيقول لها ليه مش بتشيلي اللحمه يعني من فوق العظم بتاع الكوارع؟ بتقول له لا اخوك هو اللي بيحب كده، انما انت بتحب المصمصه واخوك مش هنا. فانت بتعرف خريطه لاسره ما وعلاقات افرادها، بينما هم لا يقصدون اطلاقا تقديم اي سرد شخصي عن حياتهم. نشوف ده.
خمر بدري عشان الراجل يجي يلقى خبز.
الحلاوه بقى. ونغرب بقى دلوقتي لأحسن احنا اتأخرنا في الأكل خالص على
انت كده تعملي لي فتة يا ماما؟
أيوه.
قولي لي بقى، قطعت العيش قطع صغيرة؟
قطعت العيش قطع صغيرة. المفروض كان يتحمر.
المفروض العيش ده في ناس بتحب تحمره شوية. يتحمر في السمنة.
في حتة سمنة.
لغاية لما ينشف كده، وبعدين نحط ايه عليه الشوربة. احنا بنختصر لان احنا برضو لقمة العيش بقى لها انت معاملاه مقطعه قريب شوية، هي نشفت بقت حلوة برضه.
كده في السليم.
في ناس بتحمرها وينفع ما تحمرهاش. انا على فكره انا من رايي اللي ما تحمرهاش يعني هي مش مستاهله سمنه كتير بقى يعني.
لا هي خلاص اتحمرت.
السمنه اللي مقطوعه.
اصل احنا اتاخرنا، الولاد قاعدين متاخرات والولاد قاعدين يستنوك وانت كده اخطات خطا جسيم. انا هحط
فتة تاني بقى.
رغم ان هي عارفه ان هو بيصورها فيديو وان هو والابلودت يعني اونلاين، وهي عارفه ان عندها ناس بيشوفوها الحقيقه لان ابنها بيصورها دايما في اكلات تانية، بس ده كله مش مهم. المهم بالنسبه لها ان الاكل اتاخر وانت اخطات خطا جسيم جدا. بعد كده الكوارع لازم تتاكل سخنه، ما ينفعش ناكلها بارده. فكره الاخلاص للاكل ده ممكن الحين عندي فيديوهات كتير بتخص ده لان دي هوايتي.
بس ما تفردهوش كده في الطبلية سيبيه عشان خاطر لا عشان تعمل ايه
في الفيديو ده ممكن يعني تشوف فكرة التعليم
الست عليا حلوة.
الماستر اللي بتعمل الفطير بتحاول توضح لمرات الابن او البنت او الجارة ازاي تعمل الحاجات كويس، وبتفضل وراها بإصرار لغاية ما تشوف ان هي بتشد العجينة بتاعة الفطير ازاي وبتقلبها ازاي من غير ما تقطعها. فانت بتحس هنا فعلا، وهي عارفة انها بتتصور طبعا وعندها هي نفسها برضو طبخات تانية موجودة على الانترنت، لكن في اصرار بان الخبرة الشفوية دي تتنقل من الست الاكبر للاصغر. عايزة أختم كلامي إن أنا من أول ما بدأت أتكلم النهاردة كنت بستخدم كلمة أكل مش طعام إلا نادرا، لأني فعلا حاسة إن الأكل في العربية هو فعل الأكل وهو ما يؤكل، إنك تتحدث عن اللغة في موازاة مع الأكل. لكن اللغة ليست الكلام فقط بل هي الكتابة أيضا. الحقيقة إن في حاجة تانية كنت أتمنى يعني أشاركها معاكم، وهي التشابه الرهيب جدا بين القصايد، بين كتابة قصيدة وبين عمل طبخة. قصيدة لما بتعطي قصيدة مسودة، أنا شخصيا لما بعطي مسودة قصيدة لحد صاحبي يقراها بحس إن أنا بعطيله سر من أسراري. وبرضو لما حد بيطلب مني بالذات وصفة المسقعة بتاعت أبويا واعطاها له، بتحس انك بتعطيه سر من اسرارك. ودايما بيبقى فيه التوتر ده ان هو لما يشوف القصيده مطبوعه واكون غيرت فيها كلمات هيعرف سر ما، او لما يجي عندي وياكل نفس الاكل هيعرف سر ما. متعه تذوق الطعام هي نوع من المعرفه بالداخل، ولكن قد تكون هذه المعرفه معقده عندما يرتبط الداخل بالتاريخ الشخصي بطبق محدد وذكرياته واللغه الوصفه له. في مشهد من طفولتي عايزة أختم به الكلام عن الأكل واللغة. المشهد ده بيخص القرى المصرية في الدلتا، الأكل بتاع الجنازات. لما كان بيبقى في جنازة في القرية بتاعتي كانت التقليد هو إن الناس بيجتمعوا بعد الدفن وبعد الصلاة في مكان معين، لا إما دار المضيافة في وسط القرية، لا إما خيمة لو كان الميت غني بيجيبوا مسوان، يعني خيمة كبيرة وفيها كراسي وكذا. كان تقليد إن كل بيت بيطلع أكل للجنازة. الأكل بتاع الجنازة ده كان المرأة أو الأم أو الجدة بيشيلوا صينية كبيرة عادة بيكون فيها لحوم ونوع من الخضار وسلطة، واللي بيسموه شفشق أو دورق فيه عصير أو مية. والبنت الصغيرة اللي هو كنت أنا في الحالة دي بتشيل كرسي مربع صغير وبتمشي مع الأدلت اللي رايح الجنازة. وبعد ما كل الستات دول بيوصلوا للجنازة بيكون هناك شخص محدد وظيفته ان هو ياخد الكرسي من الطفل، الكرسي المربع ده او القاعده، بلاش كلمه كرسي عشان ما تتلخبطوش، قاعده مربعه، وبعدين ينزل الصينيه من الست بتاعه البيت ويحط الاكل. بعد الناس بيكونوا جايين في نفس اللحظه من الصلاه، لازم يكون التوقيت مظبوط جدا. كل واحد بيروح بيسال على صينيه مراته او امه، وبيقعد مع الضيوف اللي جايين يحضروا العزاء او اهل الميت علشان ياكلوا. الاكل بتاع الجنازه في قريتي على الاقل ما كانش ابدا يبقى فيه حلويات. فبالنسبه لي كان انك تشوف في كندا الريسبشن اللي بيحصل بعد التأبين في حفلات التأبين وبعد الجنازات هو عادة تقريبا فينجر فودز وحلويات كتير جدا. اللقطة دي بالنسبة لي هي لقطة بتمثل فعلا التجاور الرهيب ده في اللغة والأكل، بمعنى ان فيه لغة للجنازة. في مصر انت ما فيش عندك ضيوف، يعني انت مش بتضيف ناس في بيتك. الحقيقه ان كل الضيوف هم ضيوف الميت اللي مات اوريدي، وعشان كده الاكل بيحصل في مكان محايد، والاكل لازم يحترم فكره انك ضيوف الميت، فما يكونش فيه حلويات. بينما في مكان اخر ممكن تكون الاحتفاء بحياه الميت اهم، وبالتالي الحلويات اللي كان يحبها لازم تكون موجوده على الترابيزه. واشكركم جدا على الصبر بتاعكم. Sure.
Are there any questions in the crowd? I think we have 5 minutes for questions. All right, thank you. Thank you, Iman.
Thank you.
No?
in 30 seconds and counting. Hello, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to be the moderator of this session, The Ties That Bind. We're going to have about an hour and a half with our speakers to continue discussing the politics of food. We're going to start with Tariq El-Aris, who will have 30 minutes each, and then we'll open for questions. We start with Tariq El-Aris, who's an associate professor of Middle Eastern Studies at Dartmouth College and associate editor of the Journal of Arabic Literature. He is the author of Trials of Arab Modernity, Literary Affects and New Political, and editor of the Arab Renaissance, a bilingual anthology of the Nahda. His forthcoming book, The Leaking Subject, Arab Culture in the Digital Age, examines the way that cyber modes of confrontation, circulation, and exhibitionism shape contemporary cultural practices and critiques of power. تفضل طارق.
Thank you. Thank you, Rana. Thank you all. I would like to start with the title of this panel, The Ties That Bond. And of course, when we think of ties, we think of molecules, we think of atoms, we think of things coming together and separating. We think also of cords, like umbilical cords. We also think of ropes that you can throw to someone to save them, but also that you can use also to tie them up. Or a rope that could be used to hang oneself. So the title of the talk, which seems like about food and community coming together around food, is a very treacherous title. It is perhaps also about bondage. It is people being tied up because they like it or being tied up against their will. So what I want to talk about today and develop an essay I wrote already for Tamawuj as part of the Sharjah biennial called Mfat'a, Toil and Trouble. What I would like to develop is this notion of community and also think about the sadomasochistic rituals of community and to look also about the political implications of these rituals that are centered around food, cooking, coming together, but also about the ties that bond. So when Christine asked me to think about food and Beirut as part of this program, the first thing that came to my mind is a dish called Mfat'a. This is the most really iconic Beiruti dish. It is almost extinct. You can buy it at this place called Makari and Hashim in Basta Tahta, in this, neighborhood, under the bridge. Under the bridge, there is also the mosque where a lot of Beirutis go to be prayed upon before they are carried to the burial in Beshura, to the cemetery in Beshura. So it is really a dish and associated with a place of origin, but also of death. And it is also of a community that is to say the least, in crisis. Because of many reasons, from Solidaire, from the current political transformations. It's a community that has to rethink itself, has to rethink its place, its relation to the city, and whether the city continues to provide this Beiruti community with its identity and of course through particular rituals. And mfatta'a making is definitely one of those. And this is Jana Trabulsi's illustration of a little graphic novel called Hilwa Ya Mfatta'a. Although I'm not sure, of course she captures the yellowness of the mfatta'a in this little booklet. So why mfatta'a? I mean, mfatta'a, what does mfatta'a means? Mfatta'a literally means the ripped one. Fatq in Arabic, to rip. And of course, here we think of a rip. We think, I'm coming from, philosophy and literary theory. I think of the makeup of the subject and Lacan, of sutures, and the undoing of the sutures that give the subject, the individual, its identity, what Lacan calls méconnaissance. So there is something in Fatta'a that is literally about the unmaking, about the ripping. But of course, Mfatta'a tafti' in Beiruti Arabic, it means to crave. It means to crave something so much that it rips something in that which is craved and in the one craving it. So it is not any desire. It is not any craving. It's a craving that comes at a great price, at a price of an undoing of a particular subject, of a particular identity, of a particular recognition of an object of desire. So when I was thinking about Mfatta'a, I felt like something really also ripped in me. I mean, something opened, something into a family unconscious, but also into a cultural unconscious, into the unconscious really of the city. And of course, we cannot think, there's a lot of talk today, again, about the city, about Beirut, about museums, about heritage, about culture, but how can we think of the city outside of the personal? How can we keep the personal and the cultural really simultaneous in our investigation? We cannot otherwise we risk objectifying and reifying the history and the culture of the city. So this rip was something very painful and very powerful that I experienced thinking about having to talk about Beirut and food and Fatta'a was the rip, was also the possibility of thinking about community in this context. So I started having this voice in my head. I started hearing this phrase when I was about to sit down and write this piece that I wrote in March and April. I started hearing this voice. Her name was Shafi'a. Her name was Shafi'a. Her name was Shafi'a. It's almost like an evil spirit that came to me. Something opened. And in that opening, in that rip, this evil spirit came to me and grabbed me and started calling its name, calling my name. And I knew this is how I was going to start. And who was Shafi'a? I mean, her name was Shafi'a. This is how I was going to start. And Shafi'a, and I'm going to show you Shafi'a. This is another Mfatta'a plate, and I will tell you more about this. This is a family picture. This is from the 1940s. This is my dad here. And this is my grandmother. And this is my grandmother's sister here leaning. And this is Shafi'a. Sorry about the quality of the picture. I apologize. But Shafi'a was my dad's aunt. So we called her Khalti Shafi'a. And she lived in As'as. And she really lived, she was poor, like it seems like she didn't marry someone who treated her very well. Her kids were, they were busy with their own lives. She was kind of by herself. And she would, during Ramadan, she would come and stay with us. تضيف, she used to come and spend a couple of days with us during Ramadan every year. And of course, she loved my dad, like Ibn Ukhti, her nephew, and and he would like, you know, pamper her and so on. And of course, whenever she came, my dad would ask her for these complicated Beiruti dishes that come from his childhood. And one of them was mfatta. And Shafia really, like for me as a kid, she spoke in this very heavy Beiruti accent. Every word, every sentence would start with wa'eh, wa'ishbek, wa'eh. And me as a kid hearing Shafia, and she had this hair that was, I think she had it dyed, but it was a very poor dye, you know, like oxygenated water. So and it was frizzy. I mean, she was almost, there's something abject for that little child looking at this woman. Who is she? Where is she coming from? When I mean, coming to Sanaya, she was not only coming from the past, but almost she was the past herself. It was the past. It was a certain kind of old Beiruti identity with all its accents and all what it represses in the name of being a modern Beirut, of being a modern Muslim Beirut family that speaks French, English, and all these things. And here's this thing that's coming that is really like the yellow trace of Mfatta, that is as heavy as Mfatta, and that really embodies Mfatta. And Shafia would come and you know, start making these dishes, khabisa, which is this dish made with you know, with rose water and walnuts and sprinkled with pomegranate seed, and of course mfatta, which is this dish that is made with tahine and sugar and rice and pine nuts, and it took hours and hours and hours to make, because first you had to soak the rice and then you have to stir, because if you don't stir constantly it will stick to the bottom of the pan. And so it was really a communal dish. Everyone had to come and stir the mfatta. If you really crave mfatta, you have to work for it. You have to burn your fingers for it. So it was not only the dish was itself kind of a sadomasochistic ritual being performed in the house, that everyone had to partake in it. And you have to work for it if you really want it. And you distribute it to people and so on. So I started doing my research. This is where I put my academic hat on. And I said, okay, let's see where this fat coming from, what is the history of it. Of course, a lot of this history, like a lot of Beirut history, at least a certain kind of Beirut, is very folkloric. You know, it's very hearsay. It's, you know, some Mukhtar or some professor somewhere pretending to know something about food. But everyone seems to agree that Mfatta was made to commemorate the story of the prophet Job, Ayub. The prophet from the Old Testament who was tested by God, who embodies the sadomasochism of monotheistic religions. It is about Satan telling Jehovah, yeah, you think this servant of yours, Job, loves you so much. He loves you because you give him all this money, you give him all this cattle, because his kids are doing well. I will show you, if I take away his cattle, if I strike him with disease, he will curse you in a minute. So it's this bet, you know, between Job and God between Satan and God, about the extent to which Job loved God unconditionally, loved God and believes in him unconditionally. Of course, I'm thinking here of Trading Places, that movie with about Wall Street and okay, I can't think of the actors right now. Eddie Murphy. So Fatta is really served at this commemoration of Job, which it's called Arba'a Ayub, or the last Wednesday of April, which is this kind of a spring ritual. in Beirut, because it is thought that the prophet Job, swam or healed from his trials, because at the end he was stricken with leprosy, healed from his trial at the beach at the coast of Beirut. Of course, I later discovered that every Mediterranean city, Latakia, Arish, they all have the same version, that actually Job came and swam at the coast, and this is where, he washed in the water, and that's how he healed at the end. So Arba'a Ayyub really is a commemoration of Job, where the Beirutis would make mfat'a and go and picnic at Ramt al-Bayda. Of course, there are some versions that say Shuran, Raushe. There are some local historians who say Uza'i, which also was a traditional beach south of the city. So really the coast of the city. And they would make mfat'a and distribute it. It was really like kind of a communal ritual. And it is said that Job swam under 7 waves and washed 7 times under 7 waves to heal. And of course, we think of Beirut, the 7 gates and the 7 families. So little by little, this, her name was Shafi'a, thinking about my childhood. All of a sudden, I end up understanding or thinking more about Beirut and this coast. And Beirut, of course, when we think of I Love Life slogan, right, of Beirut, it's a city that is dedicated to the most sadomasochistic episode in the Old Testament. It's a city that is dedicated to Job. And the whole city dwellers would go out of the gate and go and spend the day. Of course, the Beirutis were not mourning and doing anything terrible. They were having fun commemorating Job. So here, there is I love life, but I love life that is associated with is a sadomasochistic ritual that tie them to God and that tie them to each other. So for me, this is, of course, on the one hand, there is a contradiction, right? There is a contradiction, like this painful episode, this most painful episode from the Bible, which is also about salvation, is so much about pain, is so much about a form of trials that mfat'a really embodies. That is, again, this notion of suffering for it, to enjoy it at the end. So what is this? How can this allow us to think of community? How does this kind of dish and what it represents, what it embodies about the city? But of course, we can't just situate it in the city. We can think about it in relation to other cities in the region. Have we given up on those sadomasochistic rituals that really brought us together in some way? Or are we really unable to give up on these sadomasochistic rituals, but they have taken different shapes and forms? Have we replaced the deal and the kind of the tempting of Job by Satan, the deal between Satan and Jehovah, by some more regional powers today? Have we replaced Jehovah by some tyrant to the north or to the south? Are we always, is this yellow stain that mfat'a leaves? And of course here, I'm thinking of the stain. If you look at the plate, it's always stained after mfat'a. It's hard to take it out. Is this stain with us? Of course, the stain, if we think of Christianity, macula peccatum, the original stain. The stain, and the Muslims have it too. It's called al-alaqa al-sawda. In French, they call it le grumeau noir, which is this idea that there is a black stain that we are born with. And somehow, in all the prophet biographies, you have this idea that somehow God has taken out that grumeau noir, that alaqa al-sawda, away from the prophet, because that's a way of kind of cleaning them or erasing? Is this stain a certain traumatic remainder? And here I go to the Deridian remainder, I go to the rest, the leftover that continues to pull us, to tie us down, but also to tie us together. It is that which conditions our subjectivity in some way, our freedom, but also that which ties us to a particular community from which we can never be untied. So it is precisely this makeup of political subjectivity, of the relation to power, that I would like to think about through food. And of course, here I kind of go to think about the way community and political community has been imagined. I want to go to one of Rana and I's favorite interlocutor, is Ahmed Faris al-Sharjah, who was in London in the 1850s. And al-Sharjah is telling his wife, al-Faryaqiyya, this is in Saq al-Saq, he's telling his wife that in 1850s London, he's telling her, you have to, learn English, you can't continue to, we have to really kind of try to fit in here. And she says, ويك ما هذا العلك أتيت بي إلى هذه البلاد لتسبكني وتصوغ مني امرأة أخرى. So here, the community, what we see is sabk, which means to mint, minting, like sabk, minting money, right? And siyagha, so what we are dealing with are metals. We are dealing with our metaphors from the industrial age. We are dealing with metallurgy as a way of thinking the community. And even when we, today, or we used to talk about, let's say, New York as the melting pot, or the United States as the melting pot, what kind of melting is it? Is it a melting of metals, or does mfat'a give us a different language to think about community? Is mfat'a's trace where the melting is not complete, where we are not dealing with metals, we are also dealing with pudding-like textures? Does that both save us and tie us down? Does that keep us stuck in the sadomasochistic rituals that we reproduce, or does that allow us to break free from them at the same time? So what I want to think about really, I mean, of course, when we think of modernity, when we think of what Sharjah saw in England in the 1850s and 1860s, and that will eventually translate into nationalist projects throughout the region, nation state, where we talk about sahr, again, this notion of sahr, which means this kind of integration, this kind of becoming part of the one same body. But it seems fat'a is not based on this melting and the sahr. And what we see in fat'a, and this is, if you can see it here, there is a coagulation that happens in fat'a. The fat'a is done when the dish, when the oil comes to the surface. When there is something called fa's al-sarij, bif al-sarij al-mfatta. It means there is an oil, there is a coagulation. So the mfatta is done not based on a total unity of its different ingredients. There is something that remains other, that remains separate within that dish itself. So this melting, the sahr, the siyagha is not complete. It doesn't produce one identity, one product. This identity, this product is always ripped, And this is where, how do we think of this rip, again, as something that is not only in the kind of Orientalist fashion, tying us to a cycle of repetition where we just replace Jehovah by whoever is around and who has power, but how do we also find ways, see this rip as an exit, as a way to, as a possibility to think outside of this model of modernity that we either abide by or fall short of? How do we think of the nation state as the ideal model that requires total equality and a total coming together of the different ingredients to make the one, and how not to think about it, how to uphold difference, how to uphold separation within this notion of community. And upholding this separation, upholding this kind of coagulation that comes with mfat'a is also tied to these kind of sadomasochistic rituals that we have to understand, think about, and think of our relation with. And here, I want to kind of end with, by invoking another one of our interlocutors who also thought about Job, thought about Ayub, and thought about Ayub in this very place, this very table, a couple of years ago, and this is Huda Barakat, the Lebanese author, who gave a talk here about Ayub, about Job. And at the time I didn't understand why Huda is going to Ayub as a metaphor, until I started thinking about food, mfat'a, and discovered Ayub myself, and Ayub's fundamental importance to the history of Beirut and also to the history of this region in general. And this is where I go to Huda to think about this. أيوب الذي حُكِم ولم يسأل بدا خارج محاكمته يكاد يكون غير معني بها. تبع أيوب قانون نفسه فبرأها. ما قبل به لم يكن استسلاما. نقل أيوب معركته إلى حيث قوته في ذاته الواحدة والفريدة. And this is again, of course we can think of Sisyphus in the myth, in Camus' reading of Sisyphus, as also the possibility of freedom in the trial, as the possibility of freedom in consciousness, And this is the possibility where we can think outside, where we can exploit, if you like, our kind of sadomasochism, but at the same time think outside of this Western, this project of modernity that we either have or don't have, that we either fulfill entirely or completely fall short of. And I will end on this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Tariq, for this very animated and inspiring talk. We now move to Deepa Basti, who's coming all the way from Bangalore, from the Forager Collective. The Forager Collective is a fluid group of writers and artists interested in investigating shifting forms of politics, culture, physical geographies, and socioeconomic structures in the contemporary world. They participate in experimental, cross-cultural, and interdisciplinary collaborations with artists, writers, and curators, and other creative practitioners in both digital and physical spaces. They are the founders of the Forager magazine, a quarterly online journal of on the politics of food.
Thank you. Thank you, Rana. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Sorry. So, yesterday was, so my colleague is also here. So yesterday was our second day in Beirut, and something happened that was very relevant to what I want to talk about. So yesterday we were invited to what we were told was a women's only, sort of like a salon kind of thing at somebody's house. But I wasn't feeling very well last night, and so ended up cancelling it. And then this morning I woke up and there was not even the slightest hint of how tired and miserable I was feeling yesterday. And then I told myself, okay, there is this element of doubt whether I was actually feeling as tired as I thought I was. And there was also a very deep regret. And that to me was very relevant, because I'm here today to talk about the idea of the day after, which is, the day after. It could be like last night, a day after something that did not happen. Or if we had gone, I'm sure I would have had a very different story to talk about today. So the day after is something that the philosopher Slavoj Žižek has been talking about a lot, on and off. He talks about how, there is a Sunday and there is some protest about something that is probably happening in all our countries, and then we might like something on Facebook, or we might join an online protest, or actually go out to the town square and join the protest and hold some placards and come back. And then the Sunday is over, and on Monday morning we go back to our own routine lives. So he asks this question about our fascination with the event itself and not what happens the day after. So what happens after the protests are over and after the placards are put away and the candles are blown out. So the idea that you wake up the next morning and the repercussions of what happened the previous day is something that you are left to kind of deal with and to question and to sort of ask yourself, okay, what are you going to do next? And this is something that the Sharjah Collective has been thinking about a lot as well, because while of course the revolt, and I use the word revolt for everything, it could be a dinner party from the previous night, or the salon that I did not go to yesterday, or even a larger revolution that might be happening in various countries around the world. While that is of course important, the next morning you wake up and how are you going to deal with the mess, or otherwise, of whatever happened the previous night. And these impacts may be positive, may be negative, depending on who you're asking, who is looking at this particular question. So I think something that we have been thinking about a lot is how is normal life going to change the day after, or if it is even going to change in the first place. The enthusiasm of the protest, once that is spent, what are you left with? And there's a line that he talks about how if there is a revolt but there is no revolution that follows it, then is there an act of true violence, where the act of true violence is something that changes the very basic infrastructure of the society. It could be a change in the social structure, it could be change in the way the ranks of society are sort of defined and understood, or whatever change. So that is the idea of the true violence that happens. And to tie that in with the other thing that I want to talk about today is the leftover food. I'm sure you all also have this idea of making something else with food that is left over. So in India it's a big country, and we have very, very different cuisines all over the country. But I come from this South Indian state called Karnataka, and we have our staple food is rice. So we use a lot of rice in pretty much everything. And in most households, we always I grew up in a very small town, and we used to make a lot of extra rice because there was always people passing by who would just stop by. It was just sort of understood. If you came home between a certain time, you were expected to be fed. They expected you to feed them either lunch or dinner. So there would always be, extra food. The basics would always be there. And obviously, possibly in the 60s or 70s, this happened a lot more than it happens now. Nowadays, everybody either texts or calls before they come, so you know if someone's going to stay. So there would always be extra rice, and I'm sure in different parts of the country it would be different dishes. So, and the next morning, our mothers would make it into something else, and that would be the lunch for that day's, school day. Or it could be the breakfast that was served this morning. So there's this entire culture that revolves around food that is left over from the previous day. And it's fascinating because throughout, to me, the idea of the leftover food, whether you use it or not in the first place, is very indicative of your financial status. So in the 1930s or around that time, during the Great Depression, housewives in the US were encouraged to think of it as a very challenging thing. And I was reading, we read this article where everything from okra to pieces of pastry to every single thing that was in the house was mixed in a big pot and baked into a pie. It doesn't sound very appetizing, but then that was the way they dealt with it, and they were seen as this very patriotic people if they ate something which was not really very tasty, but they used up everything. So waste not, want not was something that was very encouraged. And past the Depression, when things began getting better financially, it was seen as a very prestigious thing to tell people that they were throwing away food, because also food began to be much more inexpensive than it used to be. So people were throwing away food, and they took pride in saying that they were throwing away food, because it meant, it showed to the world that they were rich enough to be able to do so. And that is something that, throughout history, leftover food has been both celebrated and sort of really seen as this very shameful thing where you no longer eat leftover food because it's not good enough. If that was the more sort of the global thing, in India we have another very important element that is added on to it. It's that of the caste and the community. So for those of you who are not very familiar, so India has this very loosely based sort of four main castes, which are very, very important for Indian politics especially. So whereas earlier, before we became a British colony, and much earlier, it was something that you could choose to be. So there was the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, who were the warrior class. The Brahmins were the priestly, the educated class. Then there was the Vaishyas, who were the merchant class, and then the Shudras, who were more the working class. And over time, for the past 200 to 250 years, it has become extremely rigid. So if you're born into a caste, you can never change it. You can probably change your religion from being a Hindu to a Muslim or a Christian or something else, but you can never change a caste. And the leftover food has a very important role to play in this caste and community thing, because no matter how rich you might be or how not so rich, we have this culture where one is that the guests are not fed leftover food, because we have this philosophy of Atithi Devo Bhava, which means that God comes to your house in the form of a guest. So how you treat your guests is indirectly how you would be treating God. So you have to, it just means that you have to treat the guests really, really well and feed them good food and all that. So there's this thing where no matter how closely related that guest might be to you and your family, you would never serve them the leftover food, no matter how tasty it is, or if you couldn't afford it, you borrowed from the neighbor's house and made them fresh food. So, and neither is leftover food served during weddings or other auspicious feasts. But where the caste thing comes in is where there was this, I'm sure it exists in some parts of the country even now, where workers, it's a very uncomfortable word, but servants is still used very extensively. So these servants would be served the food that was left over from what their employers ate. So there was the whole feudal system where even, though officially we never use the word slavery, slavery has existed in various forms in India as well. And these slaves were fed and a lot of times they were served the same plantain leaf. The banana leaf was used as food plates a lot in India. So the same plantain leaves whatever was left over on the leaf would be given to to these workers, and they had to scrape food from it and eat from that. And this is something that, so now it is no longer politically correct to call them Shudras. So there's a word, so the lower castes are called the Dalits, and there's a lot of Dalit writing which comes in, which is coming in, and a lot of them refer to this food angle. How there is, there was, most of the times there was a lack of food more than there being any presence of food, and which is very disturbing because a lot of times these were the people who were cultivating the landlords' lands, and they were growing the grains and the rice or vegetables or whatever, but then they would always be fed the scraps and leftovers of the food. And the other thing which is sort of, if that was being controlled by the employers, and there's also another larger and to me personally more disturbing sense of control by the government, which is happening a lot right now. So there are two things. We have a public distribution system where food grains and sugar and other groceries are given by a government controlled system to people within a certain economic bracket at highly subsidized prices. So these, and obviously what, a couple of years ago in my home state of Karnataka, the government announced that they would give 1 kilogram of rice, which is our staple food, for 1 rupee per kilo. And that is, I'm not sure how much that is, that's very, very, very little. So, so it was, for a lot of people, of course, it was a very convenient thing. But then what was not really talked about was in certain parts of the state, rice was just something that they ate maybe twice or thrice a year as a treat. It was not a staple food at all, and they used to eat corn and different kinds of millets. So here what was happening is that the government was trying to regulate, trying to control what people ate. And I think it is well accepted that how your access to food or lack thereof is what leads to a lot of control. And if you're controlling somebody's food, you're controlling how they behave, how they live, how the culture is developed or not developed. So this has been happening quite a lot. There was a lot of hue and cry, and it was interesting that they kind of increased the prices of these millets and corn, while again reducing the cost of the price of rice. So poor, people who couldn't afford prices, food at regular prices were kind of forced to change their entire food habits. And that obviously translated to health issues because they had no idea what, how to kind of counter the high carb diets. And the other thing which is extremely, debated right now in India is the beef issue. Again, a way that the government is trying to control what people are eating. Because in India, we call it the myth of the holy cow. Because there's this narrative, and like in several countries of the world, we have a highly, extreme right-wing government at the center right now. And the narrative that the cow is a very holy animal, and Hindus, which make up the majority of the country, do not eat beef, is something that is becoming very popular. And it's very disturbing because it is very well documented that people right from the Vedic times, Hindus are supposed to derive their religious tenets from the Vedas, which are said to be some 5,000 years old or something. So it's documented there as to how people used to eat beef, and it was just another meat. It was not, it was not holy or anything. But here what's happening is beef is the cheapest of all meats that's available in all over the country. And now the slaughtering cows is illegal. In fact, it's reached such it's always been illegal in some states. But there is this vigilante groups that are becoming very popular called Go Rakshaks, which translate to cow protectors, quite literally. So they go around, and it's become that bad so that, they might look at you, if they don't like your face, they can just say that you are suspected of hoarding, of storing beef in your house and kill you. And it's actually happening, as disturbing as it sounds. So there have been a lot of beef-related deaths in India in the last 2-3 years, and the mainstream media is barely talking about it. So these means of state control of food is also something which is something that we think about a lot. And to me, that is this whole paradox of forced choices, where the community, and here by the community it could be your caste, it could be the community, the larger society, or the government itself, how they give you this illusion that you have the freedom to choose anything that you want, to eat whatever that you want, but as long as you are choosing what they want you to choose, then it's all right. If you choose something else, then you're kind of denied that freedom to choose in the first place. So there's this entire paradox of forced choices, where I think we all live in this illusion that, okay, because it's a democracy, we have all these grand choices, unlimited choices, but it's actually not the case at all. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was taking off from Mikhail Bakhtin's the grotesqueness of of the market as well, where there is this, even now, I mean, possibly it is, I know I'm kind of taking the easy way out and blaming everything on the government, on the existing government in India, but there is this thing that if you belong to a certain group right now in India, anything is possible, anything is allowed. And that sentiment, I think, is being kind of exploited a lot. So, and kind of going back to the idea of leftover food, if you're kind of there is this, even when you look at the carnivalesque idea, it is a situation where something is possible to be masked and everything becomes equal, where a carnivalesque environment, excuse me, environment where everything is possible, or all ranks and all communities and all castes become equal without any sort of hierarchies. Much as I want to be, I think, optimistic about that situation happening at some point in India, I highly doubt it, because maintaining hierarchies amongst communities and castes is something which is very comfortable for a lot of political parties. And the other thing is, on one hand, there is this whole idea of the government controlling what people are eating and what their access to certain kinds of food. And then there's also this whole idea, which I'm sure is happening here as well, just like in other countries, this whole sort of hipster ideas of how sustainably you can eat, where everything is becoming, if you can afford it. Again, the question of affordability is a big thing here, a big thing in this thing, where if you can afford it, you would rather eat organic, or you would rather eat locally grown produce, and those kind of hipster ideas, where there's also this, I am not very sure if the idea of the dumpster diving exists in India. It could, where this dumpster diving is very popular in the West, where apparently there are lots of these kind of hipster group which is interested in sustainability and being environmentally conscious, where they go and look into waste paper dustbins and pick up things from there to eat, because a lot of supermarkets there dump the food as is without kind of disposing it off in any other way. So if you go behind to the alleys behind supermarkets, there are a lot of food that you can pick up from these dustbins. So there is this whole, movement. There are also chefs right now, all these celebrity chefs like Jamie Oliver or, the other Nigella Lawson or so, where they have started kind of popularizing the idea of the leftover food, because I think that is something that we all understand. There are certain dishes which taste much better if they are 2 or 3 days old, like stews or soup or something, versus if they are served just as and when, just after they have been cooked. So these hipster ideas of what, I don't want to dismiss them as just hipster, but then there are also these, some of these ideas are things that we have culturally known for a long time. The idea of sustainability and, these using what was made something else the previous day. And, but again, when we talk about sustainability in food, it's again a very sort of slightly uncomfortable topic for us who come from India, because if you're thinking of dumpster diving and all these things being cool now and something that people should aspire to do, it is, for a lower caste person in India, this is something that has been their reality, and it is something that they have kind of experienced, and something that they want to remove from their memories, because for them it has been leftover food, and however sustainable or otherwise it might be, is something that very representative of the decades and generations of subjugation and sort of insult that has been heaped upon them. So again, to kind of go back to the idea of the day after, there is this, if you're, for somebody from looking at the entire caste system in India, there is hunger, and then there is the idea of, food not being there, the lack of food. So if hunger is this kind of revolt, then there is also this whole revolution where they have access to food now, and they have an awareness of how leftover food can be used, but then they are also uncomfortable with the revolution of being, sustainable in their food habits because of the memories that they might carry from their communities or from the memories of their ancestors. So I want to end with, asking a couple of questions, because this is not something that I seek a resolution for, but I think the first question is that if there is leftover food, and food is again and here when I talk about food, it's both the food that we eat and the food for thought as well. First question is, what do you do with the leftover food? So that's the first question, that how do you turn it into something that may be aesthetically pleasing as well as edible and sustainable and all those things. And the other is, what happens when we kind of begin to try and cook extra every day just because we want to have excess food the next day. So these two questions, and also if we are making extra food just because we want to change, want there to be this violent act of trying to change something that is very basic in society, then kind of how do you resolve, how do we answer this question to ourselves? And lastly, again, the idea of the grotesque. So we all have our own little carnivals going on in our communities and our society. So how grotesque are these carnivals that we have going on in our lives? Thank you.
Thank you, Deepa. I have a couple of questions before I give the floor to you. I was wondering to what extent is the aftermath food? So the aftermath of all these disasters and catastrophes that befall Ayub. And then thinking through them fat'a, so thinking Deepa's intervention through them fat'a, taking them fat'a as a model of thinking what happens, how are we going to deal with the aftermath. I think mostly of disasters and famines and putting people exercising sieges on food so that you make people submit to your will, these sorts of acts that take place. So could it be possible to think that these people that you're calling hipsters, that by going to the garbage dump and taking the food from there, they are actually vindicating lower class memory and lower class practices? So instead of thinking of them as just being hipster, fashionable, trendy, in fact trying to forge a community with these people that goes beyond, that takes into account the violence that is that they have been dealt with across history, and asking them for more sustainable practices as well, asking them to work together with those hipsters for more sustainable political practices. And then Tara, I was thinking of us, okay? Us is itself, I mean, she lives in the us. Yeah, she lives in the scissors, and she lives in the, Shafi'a lives in the place where things get cut. Yes, us is. It's the cut. And it's the, yes, it's, so she's the woman who makes them fat'a, who is the cut. And I'm wondering, you know, we've talked about this before. The boys that go and swim on Ain al-Mraisi, could they be the Ayyubs today? I mean, they have, in a sense, they have, where is them? I would like to recuperate them fat'a to them, because they have, they go swim in the leprosy of the city. So the entire sewers of the city go to Ain al-Mraisi. And it's disgusting, really. It's so disgusting. But they go every single day. I've been swimming with them sometimes. It's impossible. I mean, you have to close your mouth because you really don't know. You're going to drink the shit of that city. And cielo. It's actually, sometimes it's cielo, the water, as well. It's kind of fat'a-like. What is Iman? Iman was talking, we can't talk about shit and food in the same... but we can, exactly, we should talk about them. So it's not a question, but more of a comment, an association that I'm sure will throw you into a new web of associations.
All right. First, I want to... This is great, Rana. Thank you. First, I want to start with fat'a as the afterlife to kind of connect. Of course, in Totem and Taboo, Freud reads the community, or the basis of the community is in the afterlife. It's when you have this autocratic father who has all the women, and the sons plot and kill the father, and they eat him. And that act is the kind of foundational act of the community, because what comes out of that act first is you shall never kill your father, but also guilt and ethics, basically. Guilt from having killed the father, and guilt as the foundation of the ethics that makes up the community. So in some sense, the very notion of community is based on this after, you know what we did when we were too, yeah. So that's one thing. And also I think this is very important because we're kind of seeing, to come back to Christine's opening remark, which really moved me. I mean, we are living the return and the legitimacy of this autocratic father. It is no longer a myth like in the Oedipal model, or it is no longer, but it is becoming re-legitimized as a political reality that conditions our subjectivity, and that we have to accept it and undo the kind of all kinds of enlightenment projects. I'm not talking only about the European enlightenment projects, but any form of space outside of that kind of sadomasochistic relation, where you can think of the Leviathan and Hobbes, you can think of a number of political models that require sacrifice. Think of Abraham, right? I mean, that requires sacrifice and so on. So what I'm thinking of Mfatta making is also in the day after, is it a way to deal with, to contain, to critique, to open possibilities to outside of this sadomasochistic relation to power? Is it a way of thinking the community as being able, as having a particular agency to also say, I can deal with this and I'm not reduced to this? So I'm not reduced to Job. I can find rituals that also allows me to go to Ramt al-Baida and have fun and fly kites and not just simply act the pain and the trauma of Job. So is it a way of dealing with the traumatic and a way to open up a possibility for a space outside of this sadomasochistic relation? The Orientalist reading would say, no, you continue to reenact the same thing, the Orient doesn't change, and so on. So this is where Mfatta acknowledges the sadomasochism. It doesn't do away with it. It doesn't erase it. There is a trace, the yellow trace, that continues with Ain al-Mraisi and Ramt al-Baida. And the kids that are doing it are also maybe continuing that rituals. This is a beautiful association, Dana. But it's also these kind of young people who are doing it as a way of continuing that ritual and insisting on the possibility of breaking or finding ways, finding rips through which they plunge and emerge, like the oil emerging from the bottom of the pot.
No, just to take off from what you said, the stain that remains is something that is very much as I would like hipsters to kind of sort of build that community and talk about the identities in a sort of a subversive way. I think what they do falls under the realm of the not wanting to waste the food. This idea of there's so much of, I think about in developed countries, there's some 40% of the food that's produced is just wasted. It's just thrown into, the dustbins and not used at all. Whereas when it comes to the lower caste people, I think what they identify with is, I mean, it's a much more complicated system, much as, food is just one of the things that they would be talking about. So, whereas this community might be working, there might be all these, urban, educated communities which might be working towards trying not to waste food and trying to be sustainable in their food habits. For these, the lower caste people, it becomes just another way of kind of, control, because they see eating leftover foods as something that is reminiscent of, so there's nothing being done to kind of erase the caste system itself. It is just intervening in these small little pockets, which to them, I assume, would not be of much importance.
Questions?
After hearing several talks about food and the investigation of food as a topic, I can see that it can go into different directions. One is in the investigation of food itself to find more information or missing links between traditions or cultures, or the investigation of food as a metaphor or as a frame of understanding parallel traditions or parallel behavior or reframing other things. And in the latter, the question is is there a danger in using food as a metaphor to kind of recreate or understand things other than they are, or is it a means of creativity that can actually understand things in a new way or find missing gaps, or perhaps both? Yeah.
This is a question for...
I mean, I don't see that, for me, at least my investigation here is really about the practice. It's about ritual. I mean, of course, it involves a metaphorical level, and I played on this notion of disdain. This is the metaphorical part, if you like. But that's a metaphor that is very meaningful and is part of the ritual. I mean, from Christianity, the original stain, right? I mean, this is a very vibrant thing and present. But I agree with you that we need to think of practices. I mean, food also in terms of making and eating as a praxis, as a form of, as a ritualistic form of production, a community, political subjectivity, you name it. So it's very important to kind of not to reify, not to objectify food as part of a discourse on tradition or culture. And that's why I started by saying, I cannot access this outside of a personal also practice, I mean, in my case. So I kind of distanced myself from the position of the researcher who just kind of observes and analyzes from a distance. So you have to put yourself also in, at the center of this. I'm also interested in affects, but that's another kind of question altogether. But I mean, of course, it's linked to that.
Actually, I wonder if your Shafi'a is the same of my Shafi'a. I don't know, because of the difference in age. Shafi'a, of my Shafi'a, she was the mother of my uncle's wife, and she lives in Asas. Okay, this is coincidence. But because of the difference of your age and my age, I don't know if it is the same Shafi'a or not. This is one. Secondly, always Shafi'a, when she visits us, it will be the day of Mfat'a. And it is a Mfat'a celebration. So this is coincidence, but you call me, it is called all my childhood. I remember everything. When you are talking, I think you are talking about me. So this is, to me, it is surprising. It is surprising.
I have yeah, I mean, أبشع البدني. But I mean, I think this is also like the essay I wrote for Tamawush, for this also circulated and people were commenting on it and also identifying and telling their stories. And so there is something, again, about this notion of the rip, of the fatah, of this opening, that not only in terms of how we theorize this and think about this, but also in terms of identification, because this is also what you just said. Yeah, and of course, it's probably a coincidence, but it's also an identification that makes that community continue in some way, even through these forms of recognition or of self-recognition. but yeah, I mean, and they, you know, the Daily group, the group that is protesting against the destruction of the Daily on Sakhat al-Rawshi, also did the Mfatta Day, and you know, so I mean, there is definitely something that kind of moves and connects and creates these forms of identification. So yeah, I mean, I had nothing to say really.
Yeah, thank you very much for both talks, which I really appreciated. I come from Germany, and I have another observation on food practices in Germany, because I have the impression that in the younger generations, they are very much linked to subjectivation processes and to forms of becoming particular, becoming identical, and so forth. Therefore, I would like to know your experiences concerning the differences of generations. In Germany, the youngsters do not only this kind of how do you call it?
Dumpster diving.
But they mainly do their noodles nowadays themselves. They buy machines in order not to participate in the capitalist production of food. This is one part of their identity politics. But on the other hand, they differentiate themselves very much into meat-eating people, vegetarians, vegan people, and so forth. And for example, my son is not happy about the fact that he cannot prepare food for his living community because everybody eats in a different manner. So community is also destroyed while wanting to bring the people together for eating rituals. So I would like to know how it is in your cultures, because in Germany it seems really to become difficult to eat together, because there is this search for self-identification through food.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. But I think in India it's not such a big problem, because personally there are very few people, very few Indians who might be vegan, because we have a very rich culture of using dairy products, and you're either a vegetarian or you eat meat. So I think if I'm eating with my family, I'm a vegetarian and so is my family, and including my extended family. So, but I do have cousins who eat meat. They might not make it at home, but they would go to restaurants and eat. So I think as families, there are very few families which are which might have these very specific dietary restrictions. And I think if it is a bigger community, we always make two different kinds of. There's always a meat-based dish, and there's always something vegetarian. So I think given the kind of food culture we have, we don't see it very much. But then I can relate to what you're saying, because when we travel abroad, we see that a lot, especially. Last month we were in the UK, and there I think it's really kind of kicking off. One is a vegan, one eats fish but nothing else. So it's very difficult to kind of cook for a larger group of people. But thankfully we haven't seen it so much yet in India, I would say.
I mean, this is this again comes back to this notion of the return of the autocratic father and the rise of the right wing across the world, right? Not really, and this notion of we have to bring the community back together. As a response to certain forms of new communities, new forms of identifications, new rituals that we might not always recognize, but they are happening, that don't speak the same language or have the same practices as we do. I feel old, Hisham. I feel, yeah. But so in a way, there are other forms of community. I mean, in Germany, I lived in Berlin. I mean, and also you have all these different foods, this variety. So on the one hand, there is something very positive about this. But the kind of conservative response is to say that this is the sign of the demise of the German community. And therefore, we need to come back to something in nationalist terms that recodes the community in very kind of traditional forms. This is the danger. So how do we kind of look at the new generation and what they're doing, and also try to find meaning or try to understand new forms of community-making rituals that might be different from the one that has preceded them? Because the conservative response is to say this is the demise of the community, full stop. And we need to somehow, the only way to reactivate it is through a sadomasochistic relation with an authoritarian father. And this is the right-wing rise in Europe, in this region, and across the world. So it's a response to that, so we have to be very careful and creative in dealing with these new rituals and not simply pathologize them.
One last question, Haitham.
Hi. Two questions. The first, regarding you were talking about the patriarchs, sadomasochism, and kind of, and you in an earlier comment you mentioned praxis, and I wonder if you can talk a little more about like gender when it comes to this like almost emancipatory vision of mfatta'a and like the labor of women and in preparing food, and how that relates to the patriarchy in your vision of mfatta'a. And regarding dumpster diving and like the differences between upper middle class kids and working in low income class families, I mean, maybe there's also an element, like maybe talk about, is there an element of kind of class tourism to an extent that we see in these kinds of things, but also in like a re-emergence of street food as something that is kind of interesting and cool and kind of a way to deal with the guilt of being upper middle class by almost enacting, you know. So maybe if there are comments on these both subjects. Thank you.
Great question. I mean, I think, of course, the food preparation and the question of gender is really, especially today you have men chef. Actually, men chef are kind of what we saw in the earlier talk with Iman. But I mean, this is a huge question. But I think one way to think about mfatta'a, and my answer to Rana earlier, is also to think maybe about, I mean, in my household, we all had to volunteer to stir. So it was kind of across gender kind of practice, because Shafi'a over, you know, she was the kind of grand priestess of the mfatta'a making, but all the workers really crossed gender in that particular context. But another way, and I haven't developed this and I haven't thought about this enough, but if we're thinking about mfatta'a making in the context of the afterlife, of reflecting on and dealing with and critiquing and containing the sadomasochistic relations, I mean, this is where you think of women's role as the ones who are, you know, creating that opening to reflect, deal with, open up, transform, and critique that sadomasochistic ritual that is often, you know, dad, son, right? Jehovah, Job, you know, and the son how much he loves his father and how unconditional is that love. So here we can think of mfatta'a making as kind of a reflection of and critique and a re-signification of that relationship that might create openings and different possibilities of thinking community.
Thank you for your question. I think there's this huge element of guilt, like you said, because dumpster diving, as far as I know, has not yet caught on as much in India as it has elsewhere. But I think there's this whole, even when it comes to the larger idea of eating locally, or if you are in a city and if you want to eat local produce and organic food and all those fancy names that are attached, you have to be of a certain, you have to have a certain kind of money to do all that. But even if you kind of go back to the whole dumpster diving thing, if you're picking up food from the trash, then these are usually people who have the means of, being able to eat, if not in fancy restaurants, then at least in slightly, middle class sort of restaurants. Whereas there is no awareness that it is kind of an apology that they're kind of doing. But I think in the Indian context, this idea of class is, kind of becomes a larger issue because of how rigid and how pervasive the caste system is. So if you're taking food from the trash, then you're denying an entire family its afternoon meal. So while you might be kind of atoning for your guilt, you're also kind of depriving, these are complicated questions. So I think unless the caste system is completely resolved, which I unfortunately don't see happening anytime soon, I think these kind of cooler things that are happening don't really have a very influential intervention in society, I would say.
Thank you so much, Tare and Deepa, for this wonderful session. And thank you all for your questions and your attendance.
Thank you.